What is on tap at Couz's Corner today? We're talking about West Virginia Mountaineer football, and we're talking about 5 players who will step up and surprise people in the 2022 college football season. So pull up a chair, sit back, relax, and let me serve you up this shot of top shelf college football knowledge. What is up, college sports fans, fellow members of Mountaineer Nation? This is Couz, and welcome in to this edition of Couz's Corner. Pull that chair up, and let's dig into the show. Yes, I'm going to tell you about 5 players that I think will be surprises this year for the Mountaineer football team. May not necessarily be surprises to me, but surprises to those around the country and even maybe to some in Mountaineer Nation. First, let's start on the defensive side of the ball. Lance Dixon. Lance Dixon, a 6'2", 220-pound weak side linebacker. His second year in the program after transferring over from Penn State a year ago. Last year, he played in 10 games, started 4 games after coming in for an injured X Reload the second half of the season. Last season, he had 36 tackles, 24 of those being solo, and 1 pass defended. Now, he didn't play a whole lot in his career at Penn State, but they were playing him out of position, in my opinion. They had him playing at the middle linebacker spot. West Virginia has moved him over to that weak linebacker spot where I think he can better utilize his skills, his length, his athleticism. He can go out into pass coverage on running backs and tight ends and really utilize those traits that you really can't utilize as much as a Mike linebacker in the middle, which that spot will be filled by Lee Coba. Now, I've talked about Lee Coba at length and ad nauseum on this channel, so I'm going to focus on Lance Dixon today. But for some reason, Lance Dixon is not being talked about a lot around the country, and I'm not sure why, because coming out of high school, going to Penn State, he was a 5-star recruit. He was the number 13 player in the nation coming in as part of the 2019 class, the number 1 outside linebacker in the nation, and the number 2 player overall in the state of Michigan. So I'm not sure why he didn't get as much hype. Maybe it's because he plays linebacker, not quarterback. But JT Daniels is not the only former 5-star recruit that has transferred to West Virginia. Lance Dixon is also one of those guys. And after 1 year in the defense, he's starting to feel a lot more comfortable. He's gaining confidence. Coach Brown said this past week of fall camp is the best 4 or 5 days he's had as a Mountaineer. In an interview, Lance Dixon himself said he feels more comfortable, and he's really excited for this defense, and he feels like his skills will be utilized much better here than they were at his previous stop. Next, let's look at Charles Woods. Charles Woods is a 5'11", 193-pound corner. Also in his second year with the Mountaineers, coming out of FCS level Illinois State. He's a preseason All Big 12 first-team selection by Big 12 media. Now, you might say, Couz, then that means he's not a surprise. But really, other than the Big 12 media, who saw him play pretty much every game last year, not a lot of other people are talking about Charles Woods. You look at Lindy's, Athlon, and Phil Steele, 3 preseason publications. They've got him at second, third, and fourth team, respectively. So, Lindy's thinks a little highly of him than others, but when you listen to a lot of podcasters and other media outlets out there, they're not talking a lot about Charles Woods. And even though some of these outlets are showing him respect and giving him shout outs and showing him some love in these preseason rankings, I think he'll be even better than projected. His defensive backs coach, Shadon Brown, said he thinks that Charles Woods is the best defensive back, the best cornerback in the Big 12 conference. I mean, that's high praise. He says he thinks he can cover anybody in the country. So if he's a lockdown corner like Shadon Brown says he is, then I mean you're basically shutting off one half the field or the other team's best wide receiver every Saturday. Think about that, folks. That's a big deal, and that gives the Mountaineers a huge advantage. Now, some stats for Charles Woods last season. He played in 11 games, started 4, also came in for an injured Nick Troy Fortune. He had 31 tackles, 22 of those being solo, had 2 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, 4 pass breakups, and 2 fumble recoveries. One thing about Charles Woods is he plays some of his best football in big moments. One of his best games of the season last year was against Minnesota in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl, where he had an interception, 4 tackles, and a fumble recovery. In his sophomore year at Illinois State, the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, he had an interception in each of those games. So in big games and big moments, Charles Woods shows up. Also about Charles Woods, some interesting stats that I'm going to give credit to my friend Travis Kenobi, who writes for Last Word on College Football. In an article he did recently about Charles Woods, about some surprise players that on his list as well on the defensive side. He mentioned Charles Woods. According to Pro Football Focus, in zone coverage, he offered the highest grade among all cornerbacks in the country last season with a score of 90.3, which is elite level. Second place, Roger McCreary from Auburn, who just so happened to be a second-round NFL draft pick. Also, according to Pro Football Focus, among all Big 12 corners last season, Woods allowed the lowest passer rating by a wide margin. Passer rating allowed 22.1. That is just unreal, folks. Second on that list, another second-round NFL draft pick and Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, Jalen Petre, who had a rating of 55.2. So Charles Woods is in great company there and led the best player in the league defensively in pass rating allowed. So that's elite company right there that we're looking at for Charles Woods. Now let's move over to the offensive side of the ball. And let's look at a guy who I've had my eye on for quite a while, and that's Reese Smith. I don't know if it was on this show or other shows, but I talked about a few months back that I feel like Reese Smith could be a breakout star for the Mountaineers in 2022. Reese Smith is a 5'10", 187-pound inside receiver. Last season, he caught 12 balls for 124 yards and a touchdown, average of 10.3 yards per catch. 2020, he caught 11 balls for 128, so about the same. End of the year, he and Coach Brown had a sit-down heart-to-heart. Reese Smith said, look, Coach, what do I need to do to get on the field more offensively? Coach Brown said, you need to get faster. You need to get better. Reese Smith put in the work in the offseason, working with strength conditioning coach Mike Joseph, increased his speed, and now Coach Brown says he might be one of the fastest guys on the team. He's played really well this fall. He's probably going to be that number one guy at the inside receiver position along with Sam James. He'll be on one side, Sam James will be on the other. But I look for Reese Smith to have a really big year this year. He did suffer a hamstring pull in the spring, but it doesn't seem like that's bothered him too much. An interesting fact, during that heart-to-heart talk, and Reese Smith talked about this heart-to-heart talk during a presser after practice on this past Saturday, but Mike Ostie of West Virginia Sports Now brought out the fact that in that conversation, Reese Smith basically told Coach Brown, look, if I don't get to see the field more, I may leave the program and transfer out. But Coach Brown said, here's what you need to do. If you do this, you'll play. Reese Smith did it, and I'll look for him to play more this year, probably be a starter, to be a huge contributor offensively for the Mountaineers in 2022. Next player on the list, Tony Mathis Jr. Tony Mathis Jr. is a 5'11", 207-pound running back, has been the backup to Letty Brown the past 2 seasons, but this year he's going to be the guy. He's played in 21 career games with the Mountaineers, has only started 1, and that was last season's Guaranteed Rate Bowl against Minnesota. Phil Steele did name him 4th team all preseason Big 12. Last season, he carried the ball 72 times for 312 yards for an average of 4.3 a carry, 1 touchdown, and his long was 45 yards. Biggest game of the year was against Kansas, where he played almost the entire second half. He carried the ball 22 times for 118 yards and just ran the ball like a beast that game. Was just running over people, breaking tackles, making people miss in space. Just looked like a great running back. Tony Mathis is hungry. His teammates and coaches both say he's one of the hardest workers on the team. He's been mentored by Letty Brown. So, I'm sure he's learned a lot from him, and he's just ready to step up and be the guy in Morgantown. He's not getting a lot of talk. When you talk about running back rooms in the Big 12, most people rate West Virginia low, and that's fair because none of these guys have much experience, especially as starters. But I think he'll surprise some people. I look for him to have 600 or 700 yards rushing this year, and the only reason I don't think he hits 1,000 is because I think he's not going to be he will be the feature back, but I don't think he'll be the only one carrying the load. I think you'll see Justin Johnson, Jalen Anderson, maybe even C.J. Donaldson some this year that will be able to come in and give Tony Mathis some breathers and help him stay fresh so he won't have to carry the ball as many times as Letty Brown did, which might hinder him from getting to 1,000 yards, but it will make him more fresh by the end of the year, and he can still be very productive. And last but not least, let's look at the offensive line unit. Yeah, I'm not looking at one player here. I'm looking at the offensive line as a whole unit. I think people around the country are underestimating how important it is for an offensive line unit to play together for a second year in a row. You look at last season, yes, the offensive line had their struggles last year. They allowed a lot of sacks, but you have to take that into context. There are times Jarrett Doege held the ball too long. According to Coach Brown, there were a lot of times that the running backs missed blocking assignments and didn't help do their part, and there were a lot of times that tight ends missed blocking assignments. He brought in Brian Polindi, tight end out of Colorado State, to help with the blocking at the tight end position. And Tony Mathis, Justin Johnson, Jalen Anderson, those guys have really improved their blocking at the running back position during the offseason, according to the staff. Now, obviously, they have to prove it on the field, but I have confidence that they will. But also, when you look at the offensive line, as far as gelling together, last year, these guys have not played together. You had a true freshman in Wyatt Milam playing right tackle, being thrown to the wolves basically as a true freshman. You had a sophomore and Zach Frazier playing center for the first time in his career. You had Doug Nestor, who was a transfer from Virginia Tech in his first year in the program, so he was still learning the offense and the blocking schemes and that whatnot. Plus, he played the first half of the season with a broken hand and had a cast on his wrist. Second half of the season, his Pro Football Focus ratings skyrocketed because he was able to play with both hands. So that makes a difference. Of course, we had James Gamitter in there as well. But all five of these guys have had an entire season to gel together. They've had an entire offseason to get stronger, to gel together even more, to improve their technique. So I look for West Virginia's offensive line to be much, much improved in 2022 for the simple fact that they've been together longer, and they're talented guys now. They've had some really high Pro Football Focus ratings individually. They just did not play that great as a unit at times. But that will improve this season. I'm telling you, folks, be ready. Now, I'm not saying our offensive line is going to be elite. May not even be the best offensive line in the Big 12, but I do think they'll be top half of the Big 12 and will be good enough to improve this offense tremendously and get JT Daniels, I about said Jarrett Dagey, get JT Daniels enough time to throw the football and also improve the running attack. So let me know, Cougars Corner family, in the comment section, which one of these players do you expect to be a surprise player in 2022, if any? Is there one player that you also think will be a surprise player in 22? Like I said, there are other players I can name, like Lee Koba, for example, but I've talked about him ad nauseum. Didn't want to talk about him in depth again. But let me know what players you think will be breakout players for the Mountaineers this year or may surprise some people. Or what units as a whole do you think will be better than expected? Also, don't forget to check out my merch store. Links at the top of the description box. You can join Cougars Corner and become a member of my channel by hitting the join button right below. Take advantage of the perks I have to offer, like early access to content. Like, for example, the recent hype video I did. I released it out to my members at least 12 hours before I released it out to the public. So things like that you'll get as an advantage of being a member. Also, if you want to support me absolutely free, there's 4 ways you can do it. You can like the video, share the video, comment under the video, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. And don't forget to hit the notification bell and be notified of future videos and any future live streams. And with all that being said, I really appreciate you tuning into this show in Q Country Roads.